Dust motes danced in the dying afternoon light, swirling around the forgotten attic like phantoms. I shouldn't have been up here. My grandmother's stern voice, a fading memory from my childhood, echoed in my ears. Leave the attic untouched, Amelia. But curiosity, a persistent itch, had gotten the better of me. The air hung heavy with the scent of mothballs and decay. Cobwebs like ghostly tapestries veiled forgotten furniture. In the corner, tucked beneath a moth-eaten shawl, I saw it. A porcelain doll, nestled amongst dusty trinkets. She was beautiful in a haunting way. Her china skin was flawless, her features delicate. But it was her eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. They weren't painted blue or brown like a normal doll. They were black, hollow pits, like bottomless voids staring into my soul. Hungry eyes. An inexplicable urge washed over me. I had to hold her. Ignoring the prickling sensation at the back of my neck, I brushed away the shawl and picked her up. The doll was heavier than I expected, a coldness seeping through the porcelain and into my hands. Back in my room, I placed the doll on the nightstand. The room seemed to darken with her presence, the shadows taking on sharper edges. I tried to convince myself it was just the fading light, but a primal fear gnawed at me. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the old house sounded amplified, every rustle of leaves outside my window a potential threat. Around 3 a.m., I bolted upright in bed, a cold sweat clinging to me. The doll. My eyes darted to the nightstand. The doll was gone. Panic clawed at my throat. I fumbled for the lamp, its weak light revealing an empty space where the doll had been. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had I imagined it? A faint scratching sound came from the floor. My breath hitched. I trained the lamplight on the floorboards by the bed. There, nestled in the shadows, was the doll. Her black eyes seemed even more pronounced in the dim light, reflecting the faint glow with an unsettling gleam. A whimper escaped my lips. As I reached for the lamp, a sound pierced the silence. A dry, rasping whisper, barely audible. Hungry. I froze. Adrenaline surged through me. Had I really heard that? Or was the lack of sleep playing tricks on my mind? The scratching grew louder, accompanied by a rhythmic creaking sound, like something dragging itself across the floorboards. Terror coiled in my gut. I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. I couldn't stay there. But where could I go? The scratching stopped. Then, a blood-curdling giggle, devoid of any human joy, filled the room. It sounded like porcelain grinding against porcelain, sending shivers down my spine. I turned to run, my eyes landing on the doll once more. She was on the bed now, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her black eyes seemed to bore into me, the hunger in them palpable. The giggling grew louder, closer. It was coming from the doll. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The crash echoed in the stillness, but the giggling didn't stop. It grew frantic, desperate. Then the scratching started again, this time from beneath the bed. There was nowhere to run. Trapped, I backed against the wall, watching in horror as the floorboards by the bed began to rise, creaking in protest. A skeletal hand, porcelain white and impossibly long, emerged from the gap. Then another, and another. A porcelain figure, grotesque and skeletal, rose from the floorboards, its black eyes gleaming with a manic hunger. It mimicked the doll in every detail, its porcelain body cracked and chipped, revealing glimpses of darkness within. The giggling stopped. In a voice that sounded like nails scraping on a chalkboard, it rasped, "Finally, dinner is served!" I screamed, a primal, desperate cry. The creature lunged, its long, spindly fingers reaching for me, my vision blurred with tears. This couldn't be happening. Just then, a crash echoed from downstairs. The creature froze, its head cocked towards the sound. I saw a flicker of hesitation in its black eyes. Using that momentary lapse, I lunged for the nightstand, grabbing a heavy porcelain vase. With a desperate roar, I smashed it against the creature's head. The china shattered with a deafening crack, showering the room in porcelain shards. The creature recoiled with a shriek that chilled me to the bone. It stumbled back, its black eyes flickering with a dying light. Then, slowly, it began to crumble, collapsing into a pile of broken porcelain. The doll on the nightstand remained untouched, its black eyes staring vacantly. Relief washed over me, weak and shaky, but relief nonetheless. Dawn was just starting to paint the sky a pale orange as I sat huddled in the corner, the remnants of the vase lying forgotten on the floor. The urge to chuck the doll out the window, to shatter it into a million pieces, was overpowering. But something held me back. A morbid curiosity, perhaps, or maybe a lingering fear. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Days turned into weeks. I kept the doll on the nightstand, a constant reminder of the horrifying night. Sleep remained elusive. Every creak, every rustle sent me bolting upright. I jumped at shadows, my nerves perpetually on edge. One afternoon, while cleaning my room, I noticed something strange. A single shard of porcelain, missing from the pile on the floor, lay nestled beside the doll. It wasn't a random piece. It fit perfectly back onto the creature's shattered skull, completing the image of its grotesque visage. A cold dread filled me. Panic clawed at my throat. I hadn't thrown the shard. It had moved on its own. It was a chilling reminder that whatever evil resided within the doll, it wasn't gone. Desperate, I decided to consult my grandmother's old friend, Mrs. Alcott, a woman steeped in local lore. Reaching her rambling Victorian house on the outskirts of town, I poured out my story. Mrs. Alcott listened intently, her weathered face creased with concern. When I finished, she sighed and said, "The dollmaker, Amelia. He was a strange man obsessed with capturing souls in porcelain." She went on to explain the legend. The dollmaker, driven mad by his ambition, had crafted dolls that housed malevolent spirits. The black eyes were windows to the souls trapped within, forever hungry for something they could never have. Life. My blood ran cold. "What do I do?" I whispered, my voice barely above a croak. Mrs. Alcott's eyes held a glimmer of sadness. "There's no easy answer, child. The dollmaker's creations are notoriously difficult to destroy. Fire won't work, nor will simple smashing. You need to sever the connection between the doll and the spirit within." She gave me a cryptic set of instructions involving a ritualistic cleansing with herbs and moonlight. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, but I was desperate. That night, I performed the ritual under the watchful eye of a full moon. The air crackled with a strange energy as I chanted the words Mrs. Alcott had provided. The doll remained stubbornly inert, its black eyes mocking my efforts. Just as I began to lose hope, a tremor ran through the room. The doll twitched violently, its painted face contorting in a silent scream. Then, with a deafening crack, it split down the middle, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness within. A shriek, ear-piercing and raw, erupted from the doll. It tore through me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for breath. Then, as quickly as it began, the darkness subsided, leaving behind a hollow shell and an echo of silence. Exhausted but strangely exhilarated, I collapsed onto the floor. The doll was broken, the creature vanquished. Yet a part of me knew this might not be the end. There could be more dolls out there, waiting to be awakened. The next morning I packed the broken doll and the remaining porcelain shards into a box. I wouldn't destroy them, not yet. They served as a constant reminder of the darkness I had faced. But somewhere, deep down, a new fear bloomed. The black eyes of the doll had seemed to linger for just a moment, a flicker of defiance in their depths. Maybe, just maybe, the hunger wasn't quite gone.